The Magic Glasses by Frank Harris, Part 2. My father was an optician, Mr. Penry began, and a maker of spectacles in Chelsea. We lived over the top in the King's Road, and my childhood was happy enough, but not in any way peculiar. Like other healthy children, I liked play much better than lessons, but my school days were too uneventful, too empty of love to be happy. My mother died when I was too young to know or regret her, and my father was kind in spite of his precise, puritanical ways. I was the only boy, which perhaps made him kinder to me, and very much younger than my two sisters, who were grown up when I was in short clothes and who married and left my father's house before I had to go to know them, or to feel much affection for them. When I was about 16, my father took me from school and began teaching me his own trade. He had been an admirable workman in his time, of the old English sort, careful and capable, though somewhat slow. The desire was always present in him to grind and polish each glass as well as he could, and this practice had given him a certain repute with a circle of good customers. He taught me every part of his craft as he had learnt it, and in the next 5 or 6 years imbued me with his own wish to do each piece of work as perfectly as possible. But this period of imitation did not last long. Before I reached manhood, I began to draw apart from my father, to live my own life and to show a love of reading and thinking foreign to his habit. It was religion which separated us. At school, I had learned some French and German, and in both languages, I came across skeptical opinions which slowly grew in my mind, and in time led me to discard and almost to dislike the religion of my father. I mention this simply because any little originality in me seemed to spring from this inquiry and from the mental struggle that convulsed 3 or 4 years of my youth. For months and months, I read feverishly to conquer my doubts, and then I read almost as eagerly to confirm my skepticism. I still remember the glow of surprise and hope which came over me the first time I read the Spinoza. One of the heroes of my thought had also made his living by polishing glasses. He was the best workman of his time, the book said, and I determined to become the best workman of my time. And from that moment, I took my trade seriously, strenuously. I learned everything I could about glass and began to make my own material after the best recipes. I got books on optics too and studied them, and so bit by bit mastered the science of my craft. I was not more than 19 or 20 when my father found out that I was a much better workman than his assistant Thompson. Some glasses had been sent to us from a great oculist in Harley Street with a multitude of minute directions. They had been made by Thompson and were brought back to us one afternoon by a very fidgety old gentleman who declared that they did not suit him at all. The letter which he showed from Sir William Creighton, the oculist, hinted that the glasses were not carefully made. My father was out, and in his absence I opened the letter. As soon as I looked at the glasses, I saw that the complaint was justified, and I told the old gentleman so. He turned out to be the famous parliamentary speaker, Lord B. He, said to me testily, "All right, young man. You make my glasses correctly, and I shall be satisfied. But not till then. You understand? Not till then." I smiled at him and told him I would do the work myself, and he went out of the shop muttering, as if only half reassured by my promises. Then I determined to show what I could do. When my father returned, I told him what had happened and asked him to leave the work to me. He consented, and I went off at once to the little workshop I had made in our backyard and settled down to the task. I made my glass and polished it, and then ground the spectacles according to the directions. When I had finished, I sent them to Sir William Creighton with a note, and a few days afterwards we had another visit from Lord B., who told my father that he had never had such glasses and that I was a perfect treasure. Like many very crotchety people, he was hard to satisfy. But once satisfied, he was as lavish in praise as in blame. Lord B made my reputation as a maker of spectacles, and for years I was content with this little triumph. I married when I was about 2 or 3 and 20, and 7 or 8 years afterwards my father died. The gap caused by his death, the void of loss and loneliness, was more than filled up by my young children. I had 2 little girls who, at this time, were a source of perpetual interest to me. How one grows to love the little creatures with their laughter and tears, their hopes and questions and make-believe, and how one's love for them is intensified by all the trouble one takes to win their love and by all the plans one weaves for their future. But all this is common human experience and will only bore you. A man's happiness is not interesting to other people, and I don't know that much happiness is good for a man himself. At any rate, during the 10 or 15 years in which I was happiest, I made least progress. As a workman, and the least intellectual advantage as a man. But when my girls began to grow up and detach themselves from the home, my intellectual nature began to stir again. One must have interest in life, and if the heart is empty, the head becomes busier, I often think. One day, I had a notable visit. A man came to get a pair of spectacles made, a remarkable man. He was young, gay, and enthusiastic, with an astonishing flow of words, an astonishing brightness of speech and manner. He seemed to light up the dingy old shop with his vivacity and happy frankness. He wanted spectacles to correct a slight dissimilarity between his right eye and his left, and he had been advised to come to me by Sir William Creighton, as the glasses would have to be particularly well made. I promised to work at them myself, and on that he burst out. I shall be very curious to see whether perfect eyes help or hurt my art. I am a painter, he went on, throwing his hair back from his forehead, and each of us painters sees life in his own way, and beauty with certain peculiarities. It would be curious, wouldn't it, if talent came from a difference between one's eyes? I smiled at his eagerness and took down his name, then altogether unknown to me, but soon to become known and memorable above all other names. Dante Gabriel Rossetti. I made the glasses, and he was enthusiastic about them, and brought me a little painting of himself by way of gratitude. There it is, said Penry, pointing to a little panel that hung by his bedside, the likeness of an extraordinary man, a genius, if ever there was one. I don't know why he took to me, except that I admired him intensely. My shop, too, was near his house in Chelsea, and he used often to drop in and pass an hour in my back parlor and talk. Such talk as I had never heard before and have never heard since. His words were food and drink to me, and more than that. Either his thoughts or the magic of his personality supplied my mind with the essence of growth and vigor which had hitherto been lacking to it. In a very real sense, Rossetti became my spiritual father. He taught me things about art that I had never imagined, opened to me a new heaven and a new earth, and above all, showed me that my craft, too, had artistic possibilities in it that I had never dreamed of before. I shall never forget the moment when he first planted the seed in me that has grown and grown till it has filled my life. It was in my parlor behind the shop. He had been talking in his eager, vivid way, pouring out truths and thoughts, epigrams and poetry, as a great jeweler sometimes poured gems from hand to hand. I had sat listening open-mouthed, trying to remember as much as I could, to assimilate some small part of that word wealth. He suddenly stopped, and we smoked on for a few minutes in silence. Then he broke out again. "Do you know, my solemn friend," he said abruptly, "that I struck an idea the other day which might suit you. I was reading one of Walter Scott's novels. That romantic stuff of his amuses me, though it isn't as deep as the sea. Well, I found out that about 100 years ago, a man like you made what they call clawed glasses. I suppose they were merely rose-tinted, he laughed. But at any rate, they were supposed to make everything beautiful in a clawed-like way. Now, why shouldn't you make such glasses? It would do Englishmen a lot of good to see things rose-tinted for a while. Then, too, you might make Rossetti glasses, he went on, laughingly. And if these dull Saxons could only get a glimpse of the passion that possesses him, it would wake them up, I know. Why not go to work, my friend, at something worth doing? Do you know, he continued seriously, there might be something in it. I don't believe, if I had had your glasses at the beginning, I should ever have been the artist I am. I mean, he said, talking half to himself, if my eyes had been all right from the beginning, I might perhaps have been contented with what I saw. But as my eyes were imperfect, I tried to see things as my soul saw them, and so invented looks and gestures that the real world would never have given me. I scarcely understood what he meant, said Mr. Penry, but his words dwelt with me. The ground had been prepared for them. He had prepared it, and at once they took root in me and began to grow. I could not get the idea of the clawed glasses and the Rossetti glasses out of my head. And at last I advertised for a pair of those old clawed glasses, and in a month or so a pair turned up. You may imagine that while I was waiting, time hung heavy on my hands, I longed to be at work. I wanted to realize the idea that had come to me while Rossetti was talking. During my acquaintance with him, I had been to his studio a dozen times and had got to know and admire that type of woman's beauty which is now connected with his name. The woman, I mean, the swan-like throat and languid air and heavy-lidded eyes, who conveys to all of us now something of Rossetti's insatiable passion. But while I was studying his work and going about steeped in the emotion of it, I noticed one day half a dozen girls whom Rossetti could have taken as models. I had begun, in fact, to see the world as Rossetti saw it. And this talk of his about the clawed glasses put the idea into my head that I might indeed be able to make a pair of spectacles which would enable people to see the world as Rossetti saw it and as I saw it when Rossetti's influence had entire possession of me. This would be a great deal easier to do, I said to myself, than to make a pair of clawed glasses. For after all, I did not know what Claude's eyes were really like, and I did know the peculiarity of Rossetti's eyes. I accordingly began to study the disparate quality in Rossetti's eyes, and after making a pair of spectacles that made my eyes see unequally to the same degree, I found that the Rossettian vision of things was sharpened and intensified to me. From that moment on, my task was easy. I had only to study any given pair of eyes and then to alter them so that they possessed the disparity of Rossetti's eyes, and the work was half done. I found, too, that I could increase this disparity a little, and in proportion as I increased it, I increased also the peculiarity of what I called the Rossettian view of things. But if I made the disparity too great, everything became blurred again. My researches had reached this point when the pair of old clawed glasses came into my hands. I saw at a glance that the optician of the 18th century had no knowledge of my work. He had contented himself, as Rossetti had guessed, with coloring the glasses very delicately and in several tints. In fact, he had studied the color peculiarities of the eye as I had studied its form peculiarities. With this hint, I completed my work. It took me only a few days to learn that Rossetti's view of color was just as limited, or I should say, just as peculiar as his view of form. And when I once understood the peculiarities of his color sight, I could reproduce them as easily as I could reproduce the peculiarities of his vision of form. I then set to work to get both these peculiarities into half a dozen different sets of glasses. The work took me some 6 or 8 months, and when I had done my best, I sent a little note round to Rossetti and awaited his coming with painful eagerness, hope and fear swaying me in turn. When he came, I gave him a pair of the spectacles, and when he put them on and looked out into the street, I watched him. He was surprised that I could see, and more than a little puzzled. While he sat thinking, I explained to him that the old clawed glasses were like, and how I had developed his suggestion into this present discovery. "You are an artist, my friend," he cried at last, "and a new kind of artist. If you can make people see the world as Claude saw it and as I see it, you can go on to make them see it as Rembrandt saw it and Velázquez. You can make the dullards understand life as the greatest have understood it. But that is impossible," he added, his face falling. "That is only a dream. You have got my real eyes, therefore you can force others to see as I see. But you have not the real eyes of Rembrandt or Velázquez or Titian. You have not the physical key to the souls of the great masters of the past, and so your work can only apply to the present and to the future. But that is enough, and more than enough," he added quickly. "Go on. There are Millia's eyes to get to, and Corot's in France, and half a dozen others, and glad I shall be to put you on the scent. You will do wonderful things, my friend, wonderful things." I was mightily uplifted by his praise and heart glad too, in my own way, but resolved at the same time not to give up the idea of making Velázquez glasses and Rembrandt glasses, for I had come to know and to admire these masters through Rossetti's talk. He was always referring to them, quoting them, so to say, and for a long time past, I had accustomed myself to spend a couple of afternoons each week in our National Gallery in order to get some knowledge of the men who were the companions of his spirit. For nearly a year after this, I spent every hour of my spare time studying in the National, and at last it seemed to me that I had got Titian's range of color quite as exactly as the old glasses had got Claude's. But it was extraordinarily difficult to get his vision of form. However, I was determined to succeed, and with infinite patience and after numberless attempts, success began slowly to come to me. To cut a long story short, I was able, in 8 or 10 years, to construct these 4 or 5 different sorts of glasses. Claude glasses and Rossetti glasses, of course, and also Titian glasses, Velázquez glasses, and Rembrandt glasses. And again, my mind came to anchor in the work accomplished. Not that I stopped thinking altogether, but that for some time my thoughts took no new flight, but hovered round and about the known. As soon as I had made the first pair of Rossetti glasses, I began to teach my assistant, Williams, how to make them too, in order to put them before the public. We soon got a large sale for them. Chelsea, old Chelsea, is almost peopled with artists, and many of them came about me and began to make my shop a rendezvous where they met and brought their friends and talked, for Rossetti had a certain following, even in his own lifetime. But my real success came with the Titian glasses. The great Venetian's romantic view of life and beauty seemed to exercise an irresistible seduction upon everyone, and the trade in his glasses soon became important. My home life at this time was not as happy as it had been. In those long years of endless experiment, my daughters had grown up and married, and my wife, I suppose, widowed of her children, wanted more of my time and attention, and just when I was taken away by my new work and began to give her less. She used to complain at first, but when she saw that complaints did not alter me, she retired into herself, as it were, and I saw less and less of her. And then, when my work was done and my new trade established, my shop, as I have told you, became the rendezvous for artists, and I grew interested in the frank, bright faces of the youthful, eager voice, and renewed my youth in the company of the young painters and writers who used to seek me out. Suddenly, I awoke to the fact that my wife was ill, very ill, and almost before I had fully realized how weak she was, she died. The loss was greater than I would have believed possible. She was gentle and kind, and I missed her every day and every hour. I think that was the beginning of my dislike for the shop that had made me neglect her. The associations of it reminded me of my fault. The daily requirements of it grew irksome to me. About this time, too, I began to miss Rossetti and the vivifying influences of his mind and talk. He went into the country a great deal, and for long periods I did not see him, and when at length we met, I found that the virtue was going out of him. He had become moody and irritable, a neuropath. Of course, the intellectual richness in him could not be hidden altogether. Now and then he would break out and talk in the old magical way, and conjure wonder out of emptiness, till means things put on beauty like a dress, and all the world was an enchanted place. But more often he was gloomy and harassed, and it saddened and depressed me to meet him. The young artists who came to my shop did not fill his place. They chattered gaily enough, but none of them was a magician as he had been, and I began to realize that genius such as his is one of the rarest gifts in the world. I am trying, with all brevity, to explain to you the causes of my melancholy and my dissatisfaction, but I don't think I have done it very convincingly. And yet, about this time, I had grown dissatisfied, ill at ease, restless, and once again, my heart emptiness drove me to work and think. The next step forward came inevitably from the last one I had taken. While studying the great painters, I had begun to notice that there was a certain quality common to all of them, a certain power they all possessed when working at highest pressure, the power of seeing things as they are, the vital and essential truth of things. I don't mean to say that all of them possess this faculty to the same degree, far from it. The truth of things to Titian is overlaid with romance. He is memorable mainly for his magic of color and beauty, while Holbein is just as memorable for his grasp of reality. But compare Titian with Giorgione or Tintoretto, and you will see that his apprehension of the reality of things is much greater than theirs. It is that which distinguishes him from the other great colorists of Venice. And as my own view of the life grew sadder and clearer, it came to me gradually as a purpose that I should try to make glasses that would show the reality, the essential truth of things, as all the great masters had seen it. And so I set to work again on a new quest. About this time, I found out that though I had many more customers in my shop, I had not made money out of my artistic enterprises. My old trade as a spectacle maker was really the most profitable branch of my business. The sale of the Rossetti glasses and the Titian glasses, which at first had been very great, fell off quickly as the novelty passed away, and it was soon apparent that I had lost more than I had gained by my artistic inventions. But whether I made £1,500 a year or £1,000 a year was a matter of indifference to me. I had doubled that cape at 40, which to me marks the end of youth in a man, and my desires were shrinking as my years increased. As long as I had enough to satisfy my wants, I was not greedy of money. This newborn desire of mine to make glasses which would show the vital truth of things soon began to possess me, and gradually I left the shop to take care of it itself, left it in the hands of my assistant Williams, and spent more and more time in the little workshop at the back, which had been the theater of all my achievements. I could not tell you how long I worked at the problem. I only know that it cost me years and years, and that as I gave more time and labor to it and more of the passion of my soul, so I come to love it more intensely and to think less of the ordinary business of life. At length, I began to live in a sort of dream, possessed by one purpose. I used to get up at night and go on with the work and rest in the day. For months together, I scarcely ate anything, in the hope that hunger might sharpen my faculties. At another time, I lived almost wholly on coffee, hoping that this would have the same effect. And at length, bit by bit and slowly, I got nearer to the goal of my desire. But when I reached it, when I had constructed glasses that would reveal the naked truth, show things as they were and men and women as they were, I found that circumstances about me had changed lamentably. In the midst of my work, I had known without realizing it that Williams had left me and started a shop opposite, with the object of selling the artistic glasses of which he declared himself the inventor. But I paid no attention to this at the time, and when 2 or 3 years afterwards I awoke again to the ordinary facts of life, I found that my business had almost deserted me. I'm not sure, but I think it was a notice to pay some debts which I hadn't the money to pay that first recalled me completely to the realities of everyday life. What irony there is in the world. Here was I, who had been laboring for years and years with the one object of making men see things as they are and men and women as they are, persecuted now and undone by the same reality which I was trying to reveal. My latest invention, too, was a commercial failure. The new glasses did not sell at all. 9 people out of 10 in England are truth blind and could make nothing of the glasses. And the small minority who have the sense of real things kept complaining that the view of life which my glasses showed them was not pleasant, as if that were any fault of mine. Williams, too, my assistant, did me a great deal of harm. He devoted himself merely to selling my spectacles, and the tradesmen succeeded where the artist and thinker starved. As soon as he found out what my new glasses were, he began to treat me contemptuously, talked of me at times as a sort of half madman whose brain was turned by the importance given to his inventions, and at other times declared that I had never invented anything at all, for the idea of the artist's glasses had been suggested by Rossetti. The young painters who frequented his shop took pleasure in spreading this legend and attributing to Rossetti what Rossetti would have been the first to disclaim. I found myself abandoned, and hours used to pass without anyone coming into my shop. The worst of it was that, when chance gave me a customer, I soon lost him. The new glasses pleased no one. At this point, I suppose, if I had been gifted with ordinary prudence, I should have begun to retrace my steps. But either we grow more obstinate as we grow older, or else the soul's passion grows by the sacrifices we make for it. Whatever the motives of my obstinacy may have been, the disappointment, the humiliation I went through seemed only to nerve me to a higher resolution. I knew I had done good work, and the disdain shown to me drove me in upon myself and my own thoughts. End of part 2. You can find the link to part 3 here in the description. If you haven't done so yet, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.